You're watching ABC News Breakfast. The government has launched an unprecedented attack on the coalition, calling it the most obstructionist opposition in 30 years. Prominent government ministers fronted the media yesterday to demand cooperation, saying important bills are being sabotaged by the opposition.
The coalition and some independent senators will today oppose legislation that paves the way for the break-up of Telstra. And this morning, Communications Minister Stephen Conroy told ABC News Breakfast the Liberals are behind the move to vote the bill down.
It is important to note that a number of National Party senators have publicly, in the last few months, expressed support for the separation of Telstra and the principle of the structure that we're putting forward. Senator Fiona Nash, Senator Barnaby Joyce and Senator John Williams all have expressed support, in fact have gone on the public record saying the industry needs to be restructured. And yet in the last few days it's become clear that they've been lent on, that Tony Abbott and the Liberals are again dictating the line to the National Party.
And for more on this, Liberal Senator Senator Cormann joins us now from Canberra. And firstly, Senator, do you expect this Telstra Bill to be voted down in the Senate, care of the Coalition and the crossbenchers?
Look, we are opposed to the Telstra Bill. It's a bill that would destroy Telstra, and it's really all part of a political strategy of the Rudd government to try and cover up for their failure on their pre-election promise to deliver on a national broadband network. But if I can make the more general point, I mean, the Rudd Labor government clearly doesn't like it when we scrutinise legislation. But the principle is really very simple. If the government puts forward good legislation, we will support it. And if the government puts forward bad legislation, which is not in the national interest, we will oppose it. On occasions, the government has agreed to make improvements to legislation as a result of pressure put on them by the coalition and other senators. But some legislation just can't be improved, and the Telstra Bill falls into that category.
But doesn't the government have a mandate on some of the key issues that have been frustrated in the Senate?
Well, I mean, the government does not have a mandate, for example, to reduce or scrap private health insurance rebate for millions of Australians. The government gave a most emphatic pre-election commitment to retain the existing private health insurance rebates. So, I mean, this government has become arrogant very quickly. They don't accept the legitimate and important role of the Senate to scrutinise their legislation and to hold them to account. And I mean, there is example after example where the Senate has stood up for people across Australia and for the national interest in the face of the government blatantly seeking to breach most emphatic pre-election commitments.
Do you see this as the government positioning itself, to give it the option at least, of calling a double dissolution election?
Look, everything the government does at present has to be seen in the prism of their attempts to get themselves re-elected. They're not governing in the national interest at the moment. They're governing in the interest of their own re-election, in their own political interest. And I mean, we've wasted weeks and weeks in the Senate debating legislation which the government has known all along did not have the support of the Senate. And if I can just make the point, the coalition, while we can have a view, we cannot block legislation on our own. We have to have at least two senators, sharing our judgment on a particular piece of legislation. That is something, of course, that the government conveniently likes to forget.
Something else that could cause a flashpoint between the coalition and the government is the issue of parental leave, and Tony Abbott is not ruling out the option of the coalition moving to either block or seriously amend Labor's parental leave scheme. Is that what the coalition is planning to do in the Senate?
Well, I mean, the government should come on board with Tony Abbott's plan for paid parental leave. The government has put forward what we would describe as a Mickey Mouse scheme, which doesn't address the financial needs of parents. Tony Abbott has put forward a scheme which would be good for women, good for families and children, and good for the economy moving forward. Tony Abbott's scheme will help lift our productivity and increase employment participation rates. And really what we've said to the government, we've put forward a very constructive, a very positive proposal. Come on board with our scheme, but I guess that this debate will continue to play out over the weeks ahead.
Senator Cormann, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Now, we'd love to know what you're thinking about the issues of the